Mr. Ian Randall, publisher of the book, Mr. Donovan Stanbury, campus registrar at the Mona campus, ladies and gentlemen, and all the people in YouTube land, welcome to the book launch of cricket's first revolutionary. I'm Akshay Mansingh. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Sport, and so you're not here to see me, so I'm going to be very quick in handing over to Mr. Ian Randall, who is the publisher and who's going to bring remarks. Now, Mr. Randall, as all of us know, has published over 500 books in his 50 years of publishing. And I think this would be one of the cherished ones. I'd also like to welcome Principal of the Mona campus, Professor Denzel Williams. Mr. Randall.
Pleasure in saying all protocols observed. You've called me up too quickly. I didn't have time to catch my breath, and then you let out my biggest secret. Over 50 years, so how old am I? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, just over a year ago, we gathered in a room just across there to launch a book, Interrogating Injustices, Essays in Honor of Sir Hilary Beckles. This is not a book written by Sir Hilary, but more about him, in which some 40 colleagues came together to celebrate him as an academic, advocate, and administrator. And if one should judge a book not by its cover, that cover was not one of my favorites anyway, but by its size, the weight of Sir Hilary's stature is indicated by the fact that it ran into 1,200 pages, the maximum size that the printing press could manage. And many purchasers quipped that instead of a bag, we should have provided a wheelbarrow to carry it. So here we are again, in the room next door, this time to celebrate Sir Hilary's latest book that he has written, and which is only 275 pages long. It is on a subject, cricket, about which he is passionate, not as an armchair spectator or a wagonist, like so many followers of West Indies cricket when the team is playing well, but as academic, advocate, and administrator, akin to the AAA concept familiar to his UWI colleagues. Now, throughout his career, Sir Hilary has either written as sole author or editor dozens of books, of which Ian Randall Publishers has been the publisher of no fewer than 15 titles, of which 5 of those books have been on cricket, which makes IRP one of his main, if not his only, publisher. There are occasions when he has strayed from the plantation, only to return, not as a prodigal son, but always bringing back with him a new work of substance that serves to elevate the reputation of our company. We could therefore say he is one of the stars in the RP galaxy, and I would like to say publicly to Sir Hilary, we are proud to have you as our author. I'll leave you with one insider's knowledge about this latest book and why you should not leave here without a copy this evening. Sir Hilary has told me that this is his best book he has ever written, and to know why, you not only have to get it, but you have to read it. Thank you.
I trust that the program has been shared with everybody, so you're aware of what's printed, but there are a few surprises in between as well as we come along. But right now we're going to hear from our featured speaker, Mr. Arnold Bertram, whom I'm supposed to introduce, which is almost a redundant task because anybody who doesn't know Arnold Bertram perhaps shouldn't be here. But just for those who may want to fill in the gap, the brief I gave actually had his birth date on it as well. So I'm going to seek permission to say that he was born in Brownstone, St. Anne, on September 9, 1942, and won a parish scholarship to Calabar High School, played Sunlight Cup for Calabar, and was a member of the school debating team. He then won a scholarship to the University of the West Indies, where he gained a BA in being an honors degree in history. and was also elected the vice president of the Guild of Undergraduates. And as one of our former principals used to say, that's the second largest election in Jamaica after the general elections. He served, and this is the part that everybody must know, the Michael Manley administration as senator and parliamentary secretary between 1974 and 76, member of parliament for Northwest St. Anne from 1976 to 1980, minister of state in the office of the prime minister 1976 to 77, Minister of Information and Culture in 1977 to 1980, and then came back in the P.J. Patterson administration, was appointed to the Senate, Member of Parliament once again from 1997, and Minister of Local Government, Information, Youth and Culture. Equally impressively are the books that Mr. Bertram has written, and it's the breadth of topics that he's covered. A Mission to Perform, a biography of the former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson, Adult Suffrage and Political Administrations in Jamaica, Jamaica at the Wicket, a study of Jamaican cricket and its role in shaping Jamaican society, The Making of a Sprinting Superpower, Jamaica on the Track, and A History of Calabar High School. I bring to you Mr. Arnold Bertram.
I think after introduction like that, I should count my winnings. But, my friend, colleagues all, let me begin by thanking my friend Sir Hilary Beckles for bestowing on me this privilege of speaking at the launch of his path-breaking publication, Cricket's First Revolutionary, Frank Worrell. This is a publication which definitely marks a milestone in the historiography of West Indies cricket as well as the journey of West Indian nationalism, and a must read for not just the audience here but for all our friends. Sir Hilary has devoted 4 decades of his adult life and his professional life to the development of these two institutions. And we are all aware of his career at university from 1979, when he joined as a history lecturer, and over the next 4 decades, the various stages that he passed through to finally becoming the Vice Chancellor of this institution. During his tenure, there's just one area that I was particularly interested in when he was head of the history department. Along with Doreen Shepherd, they edited 2 publications, Caribbean Freedom, The Economy and Society from Emancipation to the Present, and Caribbean Slavery in the Atlantic World. I don't think any 2 publications have lasted longer in terms of providing both students and tutors with a teaching manual, as well as the special focuses of Caribbean historiography. While at the university, his contribution to the development of West Indies cricket was equally monumental. Beginning in 1992, when he introduced a course in West Indies cricket, until 1994, when he was behind the establishment of the Center for Cricket Research at the Caville campus, and then his publications. In 1994, Area of Conquest, Liberation Cricket in 1995, Spirit of Dominance, 1998. And in his own words, he set out to consolidate the paradigm established by C.L.R. James that situated Test cricket performance and its political ideology within Caribbean anti-colonialism and the project of nation building. The publication that we meet here this evening to launch, Frank Worrell, the First Cricket Revolutionary, has a particular background in that the 8 years before its publication, Sir Hilary worked intimately, not with the West Indies Cricket Board at one level. Secondly, he revisited the collaboration between that group of West Indian nationalists and cricketers, and the book that he provides here today liberates Frank Worrell, to my mind, from his confinement within the boundary and brings to light the political revolutionary, socialist ideologue, and the unrelenting anti-colonial transformation leader. In reading this book, one comes across, or it conveys, a sense of history, not just of cricket, but of the West Indies and its march along the road to self-determination and independence. And begins by locating Frank Worrell in Barbados, where he was born. The book reminds us that Worrell, from his teenage years, was gifted with cricketing ability, was recognized as a cricket genius in the making, was proclaimed a prodigy by all who saw him, was by far the best all-rounder cricket in his age cohort, representing Barbados as a teenager and making his Test debut when he was just 23 years of age. We also learned, very importantly, that this cricket prodigy grew up in an environment that made him aware of the social divisions within Barbadian society. He was a 13-year-old when the labor leader Clement Payne mobilized Barbados society to really demand an improvement in their standard of living and to make demands on the colonial administration. The influence of Payne came 3 years later, and it is best described by a colleague of Frank Worrell, Clyde Walcott, who recalls, Frank and his friends organized a cricket team called the Starvation 11, and they played cricket every day in the holidays. The Starvation 11 was comprised of the inner city youth who were literally starving at the economic base of the society. That's how Clyde Walcott remembers it. The centerpiece of the book we launched tonight is Worrell's 20-year journey from the leadership of the Starvation 11 to his appointment as captain of the West Indies cricket team. It was a journey during which he emerged as an indefatigable campaigner for social justice and embarked on his mission to liberate West Indies cricket from colonial rule. What makes this book very special to me is the fact that in writing, Sir Hilary revisited the relationships that Worrell had developed with eminent leaders of the anti-colonial movement in the Caribbean, some of whom became his mentors and allies. These include C.L.R. James, of course, and Eric Williams of Trinidad, Michael Manley of Jamaica, George Lamming of Barbados, and after Louis of St. Lucia. The collaboration with Michael Manley was particularly important in that both Michael Manley and Sir Hilary got on very, very well, and after Manley's publication of the History of West Indies Cricket in 1998, which itself brought some insights into Worrell, which are reproduced in this book. For me, and I will always treasure this part of the book, where Sir Hilary describes his special relationships with the most influential of the cricketers with whom Worrell played. And I'm particularly struck with his relationship with Everton Weekes, the proletarian who never went to high school, but who led the pallbearers at Worrell's funeral, and who Sir Hilary selected to write a biography of in 2007. There is something special about Everton Weeks, which he recalls, in that Everton was also had a special place in the home of Michael Manley. And Michael would always speak feelingly about Everton Weeks. The book contains, and if we all agree, that Worrell's journey, which began 2 decades earlier and which ended with his appointment as captain of the West Indies team in 1960, was in every way, and I quote Sir Hilary here, was in every way a political war in the process of anti-colonialism. And when the West Indies Cricket Board finally retreated and announced Worrell's captaincy, it was the culmination of a long personal and public battle. captain of the West Indies cricket team, he decided to lend his talents to Boys Town. And if you know Boys Town, it's in the heart of Trench Town. And more importantly, this is the captain designate of the West Indies cricket team who says he's willing to play under the captaincy of Cleveland Richards, who was the captain of Boys Town. At which point, Cleveland Richards said, no, I cannot captain a team that has Frank Worrell as a member. Frank had gone there after Collis Smith's tragic death in 1959. And anybody who knew Collis Smith, the heart and soul of Trenchtown and Western Kingston. Nobody had a following like Collis Smith. When he was getting baptized at St. George's, the entire youth of Trenchtown went on there to see him get baptized. He always had a message, and he was the most complete repository of Christian values. Now, very importantly, Gary Sobers remembers him as his mentor, his closest friend, and his best advisor. Gary Sobers also predicted that he would become one of the greatest all-rounders of his era. And Collis Smith was in every way to Boys Town what Worrell would become to West Indies cricket. And it was to ease that loss that he chose to go to Boys Town. If Sir Frank Worrell, and I'm sure Sir Hillary is pointing us again to look at the base as we begin to recover, we'll look at the Jamaican base for a minute. Earlier this year, over 100 community teams participated in a cricket competition in Jamaica organized by the Social Development Commission. These teams were all enthusiastically supported by their communities. A lot of them have coaches. Who are the members of these teams? Who are the coaches? Do they have a relationship with the cricket authorities in Jamaica? Were they and their coaches present at the last set of matches against Australia? Or do they disappear from our view? Can there be a rebuilding process that does not begin with them, or at least gives them critical importance? One of the things Sir Hillary did when during his tenure here at the University of the West Indies was to introduce a course on West Indian cricket, and the history of West Indian cricket. I've always considered that a rebuilding process, whether such a course is not necessary in West Indian high schools. And I remember only too well that while I was at high school, the curriculum found a place for a Welsh pirate, Henry Morgan, whose claim to fame was to plunder the Spanish colonial empire and to ensure that the loot was shared by the governor of Jamaica and that some of it reached the Bank of England. The king rewarded Henry Morgan with a knighthood and then later making him Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica. Well, if our high school curriculum can find a place for Henry Morgan, I can't see why it can't find a far more deserved place for the history of West Indies cricket, and in particular, the West Indian citizens and cricketers who carried dominance for 2 decades and made the West Indies the cream of the top of the world. If we are going to proceed on this course, Sir Hillary, you'll have to postpone retirement for a much longer time, because the course in West Indies cricket And West Indian nationalism will not get far without your fullest participation. And the book you have written, which we now launch, Sir Frank Worrell, qualifies you in every way for that role you are to play. So colleagues, as we meet this evening, I cannot stress how important it is for you not only to get a copy of this book and read it, or to make sure you get extra copies, which we are coming now to Jamaica's independence and Christmas after is the ideal gift. But also for this reason. And this is where now our cricket board and our media have a role to play. We cannot limit this book to the readership of the cricket literati. That alone won't work. It requires a discussion at a broader level, and if it is to assist in the rebuilding process, becomes even more critical. So attending this function this evening and giving our support is the first step. The far more important step is ahead if West Indies cricket is to recover, and that is how we communicate in a way that helps us to build. And as we said, the direction is built from the base. And in saying that, I leave you with this thought: only the grave digger begins at the top. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we could conclude the evening right now. That was but Mr. Bertram had made mention of that fateful day in 1967 when Sir Frank passed away just up the road, and news filtered out slowly. And one of the first persons to have heard it was the late Professor Edward Baugh, who penned a poem that will be recited right now by Mr. Brian Johnson. Johnson, not Brian Johnston.
Greetings all. So this piece is called The Pulpit Eulogists of Frank Worrell, of course, written by Edward Baugh. They should have talked of cut and glance, described the dance he did on such or such a day, on what green floor, on what astonished field. Instead, they said he was a gentleman, praised him as a model for his race, noted with aplomb he took his place as senator, a cherished leader by his men in friendship steadfast, who, in spite of bitter recollection, loved his country at last. Any clown can play a gentleman, but who could time a ball so sweetly, or flick a wrist so strong, so featly? Yet those who saw him in his day have left the middled things to say: the strokes, the swing, the easy stance. But I lay you odds, all debts, a game, that the God to whom they commend his name, that God remembers cut and glance, designed, who knows, the deadly, deadly dance. Thank you.
The late Professor Edward Baugh. Very, very well done by Brian. Thank you very much. And you've heard mention of the Senate, because I'm sure most of you will recall that Sir Frank Worrell was actually an independent senator in the Bustamante government in the 1960s. Well, we move on, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our author. And once again, a bio which is probably bigger than the book itself had to be condensed into a few little snippets, but in the end I added my piece because I know this is what Sir Hilary wants to have heard. So we start with the official one, which is that Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, is a distinguished academic, international thought leader, UN committee official, and global public activist in the field of social justice and minority empowerment. Educated in the University of Hull, where he gained his bachelor's and PhD. He's a director of Sagicor Financial Corporation, chairman of the Caribbean Examination Council, chairman of the Caribbean Community Commission on Reparation and Social Justice, recipient of the prestigious Dr. Martin Luther King Award for Global Advocacy, Academic Scholarship, and Intellectual Leadership in support of social justice, institutional equity, and economic development for marginalized and oppressed ethnicities and nations. And it goes on and on and on. But permit me to get to the real bio. For those of us who know him long enough, he is also a cricketer, cricket lover, cricket historian, and cricket administrator. In the late 1960s, 3 teenagers left from rural Barbados, one named Gordon, the other named Roland, the other named Hilary, and left to join their parents in England. In the UK, they played youth cricket for their respective counties, Gordon for Hampshire, Roland for Middlesex, and Hilary for Warwickshire. And as they transitioned from youth level to professional level, their paths diverged. As you all know, Gordon Greenwich joined the West Indies setup and went on to become a West Indies great. Roland Butcher became the first first black player to represent England. And Beckles went off to Hull University in Yorkshire to become a young academic. He did not wish to take this path. He wanted, like his peers, to be a professional cricketer, but parental pressure put an end to that. On his return to the West Indies in Jamaica, to begin his academic career, he captained the Mona campus team. And I do get to give my little anecdote because as a 10-year-old boy, I used to play for the British High Commission. And because I couldn't drive at 10, the Deputy High Commissioner used to come and pick me up. And one day he said, we're going to pick up a young man who's just come from England and has been roped into the team. And off we went to Taylor Hall. And I think it was his second day in Jamaica. Out comes a young Hilary Beckles. And we played cricket together since then. He represented the campus for 20 years. But more importantly, at the age of 36, he went on to become the youngest professor of the University of the West Indies and returned to Barbados, where he had to struggle not to become a professor, but to make the first 11 of the Barbados cricket team. He had to compete with every student and had to perform probably doubly and work doubly hard because they wanted to make him the water boy. So much so that he became the first person in history for the Barbados Cricket Association to take the most amount of wickets and score the highest number of runs in a single season. He went on to do a lot more for cricket. As principal of the campus, he developed and branded the 3Ws Oval. And I pause again to say that most of you are probably aware that Sir Frank Worrell's body was laid to rest finally at the Cave Hill campus. And to his side was Sir Clyde Walcott. And I remember 4 years ago, Sir Everton looking at me and saying, I have a space up there too. And sure enough, that is where he rests as well. He established the CLR James Centre for Cricket Research, and as director of West Indies Cricket Board at that time, he established and chaired the High Performance Centre. Sir Hilary has published several books on the history and future of West Indies cricket, including West Indies cricket in the age of globalization, that foretold the coming of franchise cricket. This was in 1998, and its impact on West Indies Test cricket. And as he was outlining to somebody yesterday, he was invited to speak on this topic in every country of the world, except in the Caribbean. It was all foretold then. Today we launch cricket's first revolutionary, Frank Worrell, his political war against colonialism in the West Indies. Now I'll just also add that Sir Hilary was the initiator of the Sir Frank Worrell Memorial Lecture that's held almost annually in Cave Hill. Started with the first lecture in 1990 given by Michael Manley. And we've had, in fact, if I recall, 6 prime ministers, 5 from the region and 1 from England. We've had 4 board presidents who have come and spoken there. Sir Hilary gave the address last month on Frank Worrell, and happily it is on YouTube. I urge everybody to go and listen to it. Young cricketers who attended it have gone back and they've asked for copies of the book, which to me is the greatest testimony to what was done that day. We had Mia Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, deliver the lecture last year, and we said, what's going to happen after that? And I can tell you, I'm sorry for the person next year. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the author's remarks, Professor Sir Hilary Becker.
Okay, colleagues and friends, Lady Beckers, my brother, Scree Bertram. I came to Jamaica 46 years ago to join the faculty here at Mona. We met then and we have been brethren ever since. The same applies to Ian Randall, who was a graduate of the history department back then, and we have been good buddies ever since. So I have some of my longest friends who are here, and I thank you all for coming. Mr. Bertram, who is the author of that magisterial study on cricket, Jamaicans at the Wicket. That book has framed much of what I had to say, and I express my gratitude to him for laying the foundation for how best to understand this predicament. But how did it begin? Last year, I received a call from Wisden Cricket Magazine. As you know, Wisden Magazine is the Bible of world cricket. And the editor, Mr. Booth, said to me, could you write a 3-page essay on Frank Worrell to mark his centenary? Because Sir Frank was born on Emancipation Day, August 1st, 1924. So it was 100 years since his birth. Could you write 3 pages? Then he went on to say, we at Wisden are of the view that he has been grossly misunderstood. And if in your essay you could correct that misunderstanding, it would be wonderful. Because we knew back then, the magazine was saying that this man is not a cricketer. This man is a political, intellectual activist. And why are you restricting his analysis to how many runs he scored, how many wickets he took? Talk about what this man did for the cricket and for the world. The idea of cricket first revolutionary, that is not my concept. When he was interviewed on his last cricket match at Kennington Oval in London, 1963, having defeated England, he was interviewed, and the interviewer, Ian Wooldridge, said, listen, no man has had the impact on the world of cricket that Frank Worrell has had. As a player, as an administrator, as a visionary for the game, as a man who democratized cricket all over the world, no one has had an impact on cricket the way this man has had in 200 years. He was cricket's first revolutionary, not mine, quoting from him. Because the changes that he made to world cricket, not only West Indies cricket, to world cricket, those changes were irreversible. And that is the definition of a revolution, a transition and a reform that cannot be reversed. So that's the title concept coming from the BBC journalist 1963 in Wooldridge. Now, Frank Worrell's story is most remarkable. He was one of the first people, if not, yes, one of the first people who left his country, went to another country, became a citizen of that country, and of course I'm speaking about Jamaica. He left Barbados as a young man because, in his view, the colonial presence in Barbados was too stifling. The white domination of every aspect of life was too oppressive. The anti-black racism in his own home was too oppressive. And he packed up and he went to Trinidad. Like George Lamon, left Barbados for the same reason. I remember George Lamon and Worrell were one class apart in high school. At the age of 19, George Lamon wrote In the Castle of My Skin, one of the greatest novels written in the history of West Indian literature. And he was only 19 when he wrote that. So Frank and George were proteges. They were unusual people. They were not normal people. And he packed up and came to Trinidad, and he said, I have jumped out of the frying pan into the fire, because he found the same set of forces in Trinidad that were in Barbados. And West Indies cricket was dominated, controlled, and owned by the richest white man in Trinidad, Sir Errol de Santos. And Sir Errol de Santos owned West Indies cricket because there was no resources to fund West Indies cricket. And he was the richest man in this country, if not in the Caribbean. And he was a racist, and he made that clear. He had no problem with that. For him, cricket was the expression of white supremacy. It's our game. It's our culture. We've allowed the Indian people and the black people to play, but it's our civilization. And we must own, control, and manage it. So that was De Santos' point of view. And that was the point of view that prevented Larry Constantine, the first superstar, never to go near West Indies cricket captaincy. That was the philosophy that allowed George Headley of Jamaica, Mas Headley, the greatest cricketer in the world, in my opinion, in his time in the 40s, 30s and 40s, the man who they describe as a black Bradman. But George Headley was the greatest cricketer in the world as far as I am concerned. But he could never become the captain. They made him captain for one little match as a token. Play one match and get out of here. And that's what they did to George Headley. And at the moment they're doing that to George Headley, this young boy, Worrell, turns up on the scene. He admired George Headley. In fact, many people did not know that Mas Headley of Jamaica was Worrell's cousin. Few people knew that because Worrell's father went to Panama. George Headley was born in Panama. His father was Jamaican. His mother was Bajan. So he's a Bajan Jamaican, born in Panama. From Panama, he goes to Cuba. From Cuba, he comes back to Jamaica with his mother, and he moves to become the great superstar of cricket. And his father's family and Worrell were related. So Worrell came to Jamaica, first of all, to stay with his cousin, the great George Headley. From there he went, as you heard, he said, well, I am going to go and put my bucket down with the poorest of the poor. He went to Boys Town and spent his life down there. He became a Jamaican citizen. He captained the Jamaican cricket team, which was a great achievement. And he was known as a Jamaican who happened to have been born in Barbados. And that was his reputation. That's how he identified Jamaica was his home. And he gave an interesting explanation for that. Very interesting. He said, well, in Barbados, the brown privileged people threw in their support with the white people against the black people. So there was no room. Same in Trinidad. But in Jamaica, he said, the brown people, many of the prominent brown families, threw their support with the black people and gave them a chance. And when he came to Jamaica, he felt that there was room to launch his revolution. So Jamaica became the foundation where he now launched the revolution. And who are his mentors? Larry Constantine of Trinidad, George Headley of Jamaica, And he was going to do what they could not do. So George and Larry said, our Christ has arrived. This young boy is going to do what we have always dreamt about. This young one here, this little boy called Frank Worrell. Now, the seeds, as you've heard, of Frank Worrell's personality were child-based. He was a rebellious student. The records of his school attendance, his own narrative of his school years. He's in a colonial elite grammar school, the grammar school which we call Combermere. I guess it's the equivalent of your Campion College, but it's an elite grammar school, and he's in there. And he's always fighting with his teachers. This colonial curriculum, all of this British history, why can't we learn Caribbean? And he's in trouble year after year for asking questions about colonization. So he finishes school at 16. He's already in the Barbados cricket team. He's already selected to play for the West Indies, but the war, of course, the war intervened, which explained why there was no cricket for 3 years, and which explained why he was in his early 20s when he made his debut, because there was no cricket. So all of his friends expected him to join an elite cricket club. In Jamaica, you had Kingston Cricket Club, which in those days was called South Africa. That's what people remember. It was called South Africa. You had Melbourne, again a prominent middle-class club, and so on. So there were the same clubs in Barbados, and people expected him to play for one of them, but he refused. He formed, as you heard, his own cricket team, and he called it the Starvation 11. And this bunch of kids going around the countryside in the rural villages playing against the poor people. And Frank Worrell is the captain of this club, and it's called the Starvation 11. And why is it called the Starvation 11? Because, as you've heard, they heard as kids all of the labor rebellions where the workers' movement, before they had a rally, they would play the International Socialist song. Arise ye starvelings, arise ye the wretched of the earth, stand up for justice. So he's a teenager, and he's hearing this in his head at the age of 13, 14. Arise ye starvelings. So he forms his cricket team and call it the Starvation 11. And that was a phenomenal display of where his mind was at. So he comes to Jamaica, and as the champion of the starvelings, he goes and he plays with Boys Town, the poorest of the poor. But why is this so important? This book is about the 1950s. This is a 50s book. Why is it important? Well, because the 50s is the critical decade in modern West Indian history. It's the 50s. The workers had revolted for justice, against colonialism, democracy, the right to vote, all of these objectives. And right across the Caribbean, the workers are in revolt against colonialism. The war intervenes. Now, where is all of that ideological passion going to go? Right across the region, they had locked up Bustamante for being involved in it. They had arrested the labor leader in Barbados, Clement Payne, deported him off the island. So they were arresting and deporting all of the leaders of the workers' movement. And then came the 60s, which is the independent decade. So in the 60s, we all becoming independent, democracy, justice, right to vote, and so on. But the 50s was the transition. The 50s is the period where colonialism is digging in to survive, and the British are saying, absolutely no way will there be democracy. These are colonies, and you will stay as colonies. So the colonial power is digging in, and the workers' movement and the intellectual movement is fighting back. So the 50s is the decade where everything comes to a head. Boom, comes to a head. And in the middle of that is Frank Worrell. In fact, Frank Worrell is the greatest leader of that decade. Because we all heard of Eric Williams was fighting in Trinidad. Grantley Adams was fighting in Barbados. And Bustamante, Norman were fighting in Jamaica. So we know of all of these political leaders, but none of them was as popular as Frank Worrell. Why? Because these leaders were known primarily in their countries. They were known primarily in their countries. A few people would have heard about them across the region. But across the region, every single human being had heard of Frank Worrell and was watching Frank Worrell and was supporting Frank Worrell. So he was arguably the Caribbean's, after Marcus Garvey, he was probably the most known West Indian across the Caribbean in the aftermath of Marcus Messiah Garvey. So he's a special person. And why? Because he had the courage to tell them and to make the point. He told them, listen, this Caribbean has no future unless you have democracy, equal rights, justice for all, appointments and selections on merit until we shut down that colonial supremacy nonsense and empower the masses of people on skills, on merit, on justice. Until you do that, this region is going nowhere. And he said to them, I will prove it. So he was the man who provided the first proof of a thesis. He was the one who provided the first proof because he says, listen, I am going to take a bunch of young West Indian boys, working class boys, middle class boys, talent, black players, Indian players, colored players, white players, selected on merit, and I will take that team. I will take that team, and I will lead it, hone it, and I will beat the world. And he set out to prove it. He said, I will beat the world. I will make the West Indian cricketers the best cricketers in the world. Give me that team. I will lead them. I will hone them. I will guide them. And I will give Caribbean people the first demonstration of the proof of democracy. I will give them. And he gave us the first example that it could work. So after he had given that, well, then the rest is history. Because once he had done that, there was no holding back independence. Because independence was about each colony proving that it could manage its own affairs. And if Jamaica had to prove to Britain it could manage its affairs, if Barbados had to prove that, if one by one they all had to prove that they could manage their affairs, they need evidence. Worrell gave them the evidence. They made Worrell, they made him the captain in 1959. He started for West Indies 1948. He made his debut in 48. And his first debut as a young man, he scores 2 centuries. As a young boy. And by the end of his debut season, he was arguably the best cricketer in the Caribbean. And he had just made his first debut. His performance was extraordinary with bat and with ball. He could do anything in cricket. Then, of course, the struggle starts immediately as he had demonstrated this point. The West Indies team is picked to go to India in 1949. He made his debut in 48. He's a superstar. The team is picked to go to India, and he's on the selection. He writes a letter to the board. He says, Mr. President, I need a salary of £200 to go on this tour. He said, I don't own a plantation. I do not own a merchant house. I have no rentable property. I need something. I need something to pay the life of my 2 younger siblings. Okay? He needs to give them something because his mother's in New York, his father's somewhere else, and he needs to support his siblings. The West Indies Cricket Board told him to go to hell. We do not pay salaries to cricketers because most of the players in the team are rich men who have plantations and merchant houses and rentable property. And he said, I don't have any of these things. I need £200. And they told him no. Now, I want you to get a sense of what happened next because Frank Worrell is now going to show that he has a long-term struggle ahead of him, and he's going to plan this strategy year by year by year until he gets the public behind him and he beat the board into the ground. Dos Santos told him to go to hell. He writes back and he says to the president, Well, Mr. President, I received your letter of so-and-so, so-and-so, but it's no longer relevant because I'm no longer available to go on the tour because I have applied to Manchester University to do economics, so I'm not available. First smart move. He's not rejecting West Indian people. He is saying, I'm going to study. I'm going to Manchester, and I'm going to do economics in your faculty, and I'm going to go up there and begin my education, complete my education. So Frank Worrell is now not on the tour. He's now a student at Manchester doing his economics. The next year, West Indies team is going to England, 1950. They did not include Frank Worrell in the team because he's a student. But Frank says to the board, I'm available to represent the West Indies against England. Of course, that becomes the famous series where we beat England for the first time in England. The 3 W's, Frank Worrell scored a whole heap of runs. Even though he had not been playing cricket, he scored a whole lot of runs, and his superstar status is even more amplified. Bat and bowl. There were some matches where he opened the batting, he opened the bowling, he was doing everything. And he led us to the top. Now, then all hell broke loose the following year. We go to Australia in 1951. And now this is a showdown between West Indies and Australia for World Championship. Because we had defeated India, we had now defeated England, and Australia is the big showdown. Frank Worrell made it clear. He applied for 2 years leave from the Dean and the Vice Chancellor. He got leave, and off he went to Australia with the West Indies team. If you know what happened, the Australians almost killed us. They almost killed the West Indies team. They beat us 4-1. Frank Worrell wrote an explanation for the humiliation of the West Indies cricket team. He said, when we were in England in 50, and we beat England pretty bad, we defeated England because our captain, of course, the captain was always white. I mean, remember that. So white captain with a black team, okay? We go to England, and all of the players surrounded our captain with advice. We gave the captain all the advice he needed, how to win the toss, how to use the spin, how to use the bat in order. And the captain, John Goddard, who was one of the richest men in the Caribbean, certainly one of the richest in Barbados. The black players and the Indian players were all giving him advice. He took their advice, and they were able to beat England. When they returned home, the Caribbean media, the Guardian, the Gleaner, the Advocate, all of the newspapers carried the explanation. It shows that the colonial model still works. Here is a white man leading black people and Indian people, and you see how victorious they are? The model works. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. And they carry that editorial analysis that the colonial model is alive and well. We don't need democracy. White autocracy, black participation is the model for the future. And that's what was said in the press. When they got to Australia, the players decided, okay, so we were victorious in England because we had a brilliant white leader. And the players all backed away from the captain. When the captain asked for advice, the player says, well, you're the boss. You know everything. You're the boss. You make the decisions. And the players back away. And he had no advice. And suddenly his incompetence and his lack of skill was exposed. So the players backed away. Frank Worrell himself said, well, I used to feel in the slips. So I would feel close to the captain. But I decided I was going to feel on the fine leg boundary. So he's not going to come to me and ask me what to do next because I'm not close by. And the team collapsed under the weight of its own racism. And that was how Australia humiliated us. Then England decided, okay, if Australia can do it, we can do it too. So England hammered us in the next series. Then Australia came to the Caribbean and hammered us again. And then England, we went to England, they almost killed us in England. So Frank Worrell is on a team that is being hammered now by England 3 times in 1 decade, by Australia, and the West Indies team is at its lowest ebb. A decade had gone by, the whole of the 1950s, and we could not win a match, a series, because they refused to give Frank Worrell the leadership. And the players were saying, if every time we go to play cricket, and there are 10 Indian men and African men, and the white man is on the horse, you know, and that was what happened. So eventually, the West Indies Cricket Board took the first step. They appointed Worrell as captain to go to play against Pakistan and India. Worrell says, no, thank you very much. Because I know the plan. The plan is that you're going to appoint me as a black man to lead against India and Pakistan, and when I come back, and the next team is England, and then Australia, you're going to put a white captain again. And Worrell said, no, no thank you. No thank you very much. I will not take this unless I'm given 3 years, a 3-year tenure. So he refused. And he didn't go to India. He didn't go to Pakistan because he was embarrassed by what the board was trying to achieve. He didn't go. So he stayed home. But again, how did he proceed? He told the board that he would like to do a master's program at Manchester. So he's laying the foundation. He's done some preliminary programs to qualify to do his master's degree, so I'm not available. Again, he's not saying to the West Indian people, I'm turning my back on you. He's saying to the West Indian people, I'm furthering my skill sets so that one day, when I do get appointed, I would have all the skill sets. So, economics, and now, public administration. Because HR management and all of those skills that he needs to become a global leader, he's now pursuing these things. And this is how he's doing it, skillfully and skillfully. And in the end, it was the West Indian masses who rose up. Cricket in Trinidad, 1959, England is beating the life out of us. The Trinidadians threw bottles on the field, threw all kinds of stones and canisters. The match was abandoned and suspended because the crowd was saying, no Worrell, no cricket, no Worrell, no cricket. Goes to Barbados, the same thing, no Worrell, no cricket. And eventually, the Jamaican captain, Jerry Alexander, a white Jamaican, Cambridge graduate, very prominent man of Jamaican society, but who didn't really qualify to be on the team. He wasn't good enough to be on the team, but he was the captain. And eventually he said, he wrote to the board and offered his resignation. He said, there's a virus that has gone through the Caribbean, and the board, now I have the cure. And that virus is called Worrellitis. And I am now, Mr. President, equally infected with Worrellitis. So, and offered my resignation to the board, and the condition is that please appoint Mr. Worrell as captain of this team so that we can play cricket. So he's tendered his resignation. He becomes the vice captain on the Worrell, and that was the partnership, Worrell and Alexander, that took us really up there. So Worrell becomes the most famous cricketer in the world. He goes to Australia, and we should have defeated Australia, but they got the better of us. But the evidence in the media was clear. The Australian umpires were not neutral. Because if they were neutral, West Indies would have won the series. I think that was the public knew that if the umpiring was fair, West Indies would have won the series. But we lost the series 2-1, and that was the famous tie test. But the point is, when the West Indies were now leaving Melbourne Airport, nobody, you have to see the video for yourself. 1 million Australian people turned up. There was 5 miles of people up to the airport. 5 miles of people lined up coming to say goodbye to Frank Worrell. And when he was eventually on the plane, the Prime Minister of Australia, Dr. Menzies, approached Mr. Worrell and said, Frank, you have saved cricket for the world. We Australians have never seen cricket like this. We've never seen this aggressive, give no quarter, take none cricket. That dead culture of poking around that England had created. But you have given the world exciting cricket, love of fast bowling, aggressive batsmen. You've given the Australians your West Indian brand. And we will forever practice the West Indian brand. So, as you can see, they've been practicing the West Indian brand, and they're beating us at our own game. They're aggressive, and they give no quarter, they take none, and now they're beating us. But critically, what the Prime Minister said was this. He said, Mr. Worrell, the next time I meet you, I shall be addressing you as Sir Frank. It was Australia that spoke to Buckingham Palace and said, Sir Frank Worrell, 36 years old, Sir Frank Worrell, Australia. And that is why Australia and the Frank Worrell legacy is so powerful, because the Australian Cricket Board then said, Frank Worrell is such a phenomenal cricket leader. We want to name the trophy that the two of us will play for. From here on in to infinity, it will always be called the Frank Worrell Trophy. It was Australia who made that recommendation, that the two countries will forever play for the Frank Worrell Trophy. And the final point I wish to share with you is what happened in 1962. Frank Worrell had come back from Australia. He's a hero. The next series was against India. India was defeated 5-0. Worrell is at top of his game. And then C.L.R. James, arguably the greatest public intellectual of the time, said, I was the one who fought for Frank Worrell to become captain. It's true, he had written a whole series of essays demanding the end of colonialism, demanding the end of it. Eric Williams, the Prime Minister, got involved. You heard of Michael Manley? They were born the same year. They were both 1924 citizens. And when we closed, they all started to campaign. But James wrote a series of articles in which he said, Worrell, time has come. I fought for him in 59. This is now 62. And in the same way I made him, I will now unmake him. And James wrote this article in which he says that Worrell must go. He's past his best. He's aged. And I am absolutely opposed to Worrell leading the team to England. He must go. Right? He must go. Worrell said nothing because Eric Williams told him to say nothing. Do not reply to any of that stuff. Eric Williams was talking to Grantley Adams, was talking to Norman Manley and Buster Manty, and they were having a conversation. No. Frank must not go yet because his team is still too young. These young boys need a little more time. And Frank took the decision quietly. These young boys I have led are all brilliant young cricketers, but they're not quite ready. When they go to England, the weather, the green wickets, the conditions, the cold, they need a little more time. And Frank quietly decided that I will give them one more round of mentoring. So he quietly told the board, I will give these boys one more tour under my tutelage. So he take these young boys to England. And you must remember, these boys are in their early 20s. And England had defeated us in 53. They had defeated us in 54, and 57, and 59. So they were beating us into the ground. Frank Worrell says, no, I am not going to go until I reverse that. And I can reverse it because these young boys I have, they are so talented. All they need is a little more mentoring. And you must remember how Frank would handle these guys. You go on tour, right? The Queen is going to invite you to a function. These are working class boys. They don't have the etiquette. So Frank would take them to the tailors and say to them, if you're going to a Sunday morning brunch, you will need maybe a gray blazer and black trousers. And he would take them and dress them and show them what to do. So he would not leave them. He was actually mentoring confident young men who knew how to handle themselves in public. So he was grooming them. Not only on the field, he was grooming them. He was giving them elocution lessons. He was telling them how to speak English. Frank was taking care, and he would call them my boys. And that is why all of them who have written books have said, we would die for this man. Gary Sobers, Wes Hall, all of them said, we would have died for this man. So, he beat the hell out of England. And after he did that, he said, now we can go. Why? I will go now because these boys are now ready to take on the world. We are now to take on the world. They have all the mentoring, they have all the confidence, they are now ready. And Australia was coming. The world champion team was coming to the West Indies to flatten us again. We had never defeated Australia in a series. We started playing against Australia in 1930. Now this is 1960 something, and we had never defeated Australia. Frank said, these boys will. These boys will. He was hoping to have groomed Collie Smith to be his successor. Collie was his chosen successor. But that fateful and horrible vehicular accident, you know, the cricketers were coming from a social event. A truck goes through a red light. Collie loses his life. He was the one Frank was grooming. But then Frank decided to give it to Sobers instead, to recommend Sobers. Why? Because he said, we have never defeated Australia. And the only way we can is with tactics. Sobers has superior tactics. But later on he added, I wanted to make sure that the captaincy of the West Indies never go back to the rich and the famous, but those on merit. And Gary Sobers was a genius cricketer, a ghetto boy, no high school education, primary school, left school at 11, that was it. But here now, a ghetto boy with no secondary education was going to become the captain of the West Indies cricket team and to take on the world. And Frank said, okay, this is what I will do. Make Gary the captain, I will be the manager. I will stay on as manager. In the evening, have dinner with him, guide him, talk tactics. And Gary defeated Australia, and we became world champions for the first time in 1965. We were the world champions, and that was the Frank Worrell decade. Gary, Frank the manager, and we put Australia to the sword. And that was our great moment when, after 40 years, we have finally become cricket world champions. That is the Worrell Revolution. Took us from the bottom, took us to the top, and gave us the vision and the skills. Fortunately, a few years later, he's in India. The University of Punjab is giving him an honorary doctorate. He was already appointed Director of Student Services here at Mona. Why did he become a Mona administrator? Because the Barbadian elite society said Frank Worrell took away from us our entitlement. And remember, it was Goddard, it was Atkinson. They went back to Goddard, brought him out of retirement to Captain Frank Worrell. The Barbadian people elite says, this man will walk the streets of Bridgetown and beg bread. That's what the corporate class said. He will walk the streets of Bridgetown and beg bread because he has taken away from us what is our right to lead the West Indies. And so he came to Jamaica. And who does he buck up? Well, not Bucket. The Vice Chancellor, Sir Arthur Lewis. Sir Arthur Lewis is the Vice Chancellor of UWI, the first Vice Chancellor. And what is the significance of that? When Worrell went to Manchester University in 1949, Arthur Lewis was appointed Professor of Economics at Manchester University, the first black professor in Britain. The first black professor of Britain in Britain was Arthur Lewis, young man in his late 30s. And here are two young West Indians in Manchester. Arthur Lewis, professor, Frank Worrell, his student at Manchester. And that bond became unbreakable. So fast forward 10 years, Arthur Lewis comes home to the Caribbean, becomes Vice Chancellor, and says to Frank Worrell, when you are finished, you come home to us. We will take care of you. And Arthur Lewis made the arrangements to bring Frank Worrell out of retirement to the Mona campus and made him Director of Student Services, mentor in residence to the young people, and Frank Worrell became a UE administrator. That photograph of Frank Worrell welcoming Haile Selassie to Jamaica and representing the University of the West Indies to meet Haile Selassie at the airport and bring him to Mona was a magnificent historical moment. He goes to India to receive an honorary degree from the Punjab University, mobilize the Indian students. The professors love Frank Worrell because the Indian people love Frank Worrell because in one of the matches in the Caribbean, the Indian captain was struck in the head with a bouncer, and Frank Worrell helped to rush him to the airport, to the hospital, and Frank Worrell gave him blood to save his life. And the Indian people never forgot that their captain, his life was saved because Frank Worrell rushed him to the hospital, make it clear to all the people in the hospital, top priority, Frank gave him blood. So the Indian people wanted him to go on a tour around all the universities. But after he gave his lecture at the Punjab, he felt sick. He wasn't feeling very well. He said, I'm feeling terrible. Then he said, I want to go home. So they brought him home to Jamaica. They brought him home, took him to the hospital, our doctors looked after him, run the test. He has leukemia, and it's a virulent version of it, and he has 2 weeks to live. And Frank died at the age of 42, just across here. So he came home to UE because he was a prophet of the UE project. And he came to work here as part of the empowerment of our people, democracy and so on. So Frank's story is not the story of a cricketer. That's a part of the story. It's a phenomenal story of a decolonizer, a democracy advocate, a humanist, a man who believed in justice and who practiced what he preached. So yes, a very short life. And I was there when he was buried at Kefil. My grandmother was a Sir Frank Worrell fanatic. My grandmother loved handsome men. And there were 2 men she was in love with. She was in love with Frank Worrell and Muhammad Ali. These 2 gorgeous, handsome men, so articulate, full of words. And when Muhammad Ali was fighting against Sonny Liston in 1964, oh God, she was crying. That big, strong, big black man is going to kill that beautiful, pretty boy. And that was her thing. She prayed for Muhammad Ali. When Frank Worrell died, she was beside herself. And we lived about 2 miles away from the Kefil campus. And she said, well, they have an official funeral, they have a state funeral, but we are going. So we walked down, and we were behind the barricade, all the barbed wire, and I was there behind the barbed wire, of course, barefooted, poor people from the village. All the poor people from the villages came because this was our boy. This was our boy. So I actually saw this funeral from behind the barbed wire. So it is also personal to me, what he represented, because I knew how people felt about him. And I will share one final story with you. when the casket was about to be rolled down into the hole, and the bishop was saying, well, okay, you can lower the casket, lower the casket. And the grave diggers refused to lower it. Yeah. So the bishop, what's the problem? That man down in there is the greatest black man who has ever lived. So when his wife was going to be put down in the hole with him, they said no. So we had to go down. Down there in the red casket. We had to go there. World continues to inspire us. Hopefully, we will have the beginning of turnaround this afternoon between 1 and 2 o'clock. This is the book I shared stories with you this afternoon. Talking about what we should do. Because we have a generation of young people whose priority is not to represent their country. England, their best players fight for their country. Australia, India, you cannot, an Indian cricketer cannot tell the Indian selectors, you selected me, but I'm not available. You can imagine that in India. Thanks for the selection, but by the way, I'm playing a match in Australia. So we are the only cricket nation. And I told the heads, we are the only cricket nation that puts our B team on the field to play Test cricket. And there is going to be no change. There's going to be no change until we create an environment of citizenship where young cricketers would say, playing for my country is the greatest honor I can have. We don't have that, and we're the only ones. And they were told that the globalization of cricket, they were told that the commercialization of cricket, the T20, that the West Indies will be the only country in the world that will be destroyed in this process. Because India has enough capital to fund all their cricketers equally. England has enough capital, the private sector and government, to fund all of their cricketers equally. We are the only country that cannot do that. So, in Australia, in India, in Pakistan, they have 3 teams. This is the Test team, this is the T20 team, this is the ODI team. You cricketer, choose which one you want. And whichever team you choose, you will get the same pay, same salary. So you can choose Test cricket if that's what you prefer, T20, and so on. But in the Caribbean, the majority of our young fellows, talented ones, don't want to play Test cricket. Because what is Test cricket? Test cricket is international cricket. It's inter-nation cricket. It's nation against nation against nation. The T20 is really a commercial thing. You show some skill and then you go and make some big bucks. But the test cricket is country against country, culture against culture, sustainability, resilience, and so on. And that's where we have fallen. So the problem is back to Frank Worrell. You have to get back to getting these young boys so educated and so smart. And then you pay them properly, give them equal money, and then you leave it. So we lose Frank Worrell. Frank Worrell is losing again. You need another intervention. Thank you.
I just stopped shaking after the Frank Worrell Memorial Lecture about last week. And I think I'm in for a 3-week shake again, because that was absolutely fantastic. If I can just share 2 facts with you to follow up. That incident of giving blood for Nari Contractor, the Indian captain, was commemorated 25 years later in 1997 in Eden Gardens in Calcutta by a Sir Frank Worrell Memorial Day to collect blood. They collected 30,000 units that day, and it's been an annual event, and they've collected over 250,000 units of blood in India. About 15 years ago maybe, Vice Chancellor had brought Nari Contractor here, and UWI ran a Frank Worrell blood drive in all our campuses. And it was a pleasure to hear Nari himself narrate to me how that whole incident unfolded. That's a different talk. The other thing, a fact which I just like to tell everybody around the world, is Frank Worrell is the only cricketer in the world whose face appears on a national currency. So in spite of all the greats of the Caribbean and anywhere else, the $5 bill of Barbados has Frank Worrell's face on it. That's a testimony to a Jamaican who Barbados still claims. On the program, there's a section for questions and answers. I know we're running slightly behind time, but I still think it's important if anybody has a burning question or comment to make, that we allow them to do so now. So I'm going to open the floor. If there are anybody who has anything to ask. I mean, after that, I think all we have to know is read the book and cement it in our psyche. Well, to culminate the events, and I'm going to call on PVC Denzel Williams, principal of the Mona campus, to bring some closing remarks, and then I'll wrap it up after that. Please.
Thank you very much. When I accepted the invitation to be here, I didn't know it was going to be set up, because the master of ceremony said he is now worried for the next person who's going to come after the last Sir Frank Worrell lecture. I thought you were going to be worried for me to speak after Beckles, but it is what it is. We're here today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome everybody, and thank you very much for being here to celebrate with Sir Hilary and this wonderful piece of work. I recognize that we have some very important colleagues who have come out to celebrate with Sir Hilary for this important work on Frank Worrell. And so I don't want to go over your entire list, but just to recognize the distinguished ladies and gentlemen who have come to join the celebration today, and say thank you for being in the home of Sir Frank Worrell, the UWI. But let me specifically also acknowledge Mr. Arnold Bertram, long time sir, and welcome, and thank you very much for being here. Let me also recognize the indomitable Professor Don Roberton. Yes, it's a pleasure to see you here, sir. Really happy that you're here to celebrate with us at the UWI. Don is a UWI treasure, yes, those of us who know, and he has made tremendous contribution to the academia. We want to celebrate you for that. Thank you, Don. Let me recognize also Mr. Christopher Zaka. Chris, I didn't know that you were part of this kind of thing. I thought you were just out there making the money, but it shows how good you are. Yes, it shows how good Chris is. No, I'm joking. Chris is a humanitarian at heart. So thank you very much, Chris, for being here to celebrate with us. Let me also recognize the author, our distinguished Vice Chancellor, Sir Hilary, and most importantly, Lady Beckles, yes, who I'm pretty sure was a key part, as Sir Hilary said in the book, that a lot of these ideas, when you write in a book, you have to bounce these ideas off people, yeah? And Lady Beck was that sounding board, yes? So that is very, very important to get the work going. So thank you very much for coming out. Let me also acknowledge my colleagues in the university, my campus registrar and the team from the campus as well, our PVC as well, and other very distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Now this evening, there are a few things that I would really want to say, having had a chance to look at the book before I got here. But I want to veer off a little bit from what I want to say about the book and pick up on where Sir Hilary left off in terms of the quality of the team that really gave us 27 last week. It was a really heart-taking moment for all of us. But Sir Hilary mentioned that that's not the best team, and I was about to clap. That's a B team. But you also have a B-class administration administering over a B team. So if you're going to fix West Indies cricket, as you have alluded to from Sir Frank, you have to fix the ecosystem. The ecosystem requires both players and administrators as well, because a B-class administrator, Chris, cannot lead an A-class team. And that is something that we really need to look at in a very, very serious way, because what we saw last week is not what West Indies cricket is about, Arnold. Is not what we are about, is not the quality that we actually aspire to, and something has to be done about it in a very serious way. How is it that you have Australia coming to a pitch like Sabina Park, could identify the quality of the pitch early and drop one of their finest spinners, and West Indies decide to go into a match like that with a spinner? How can somebody answer that question, Arnold? I don't know. I don't know, but it's a serious question to be answered. How do you take a pitch like Sabina Park when Australia could actually identify what is happening on that pitch and could have dropped one of their finest spinners, and West Indies decide to play one of their finest spinners on the same pitch? Well, that is what they call a B-class administration. But suffice to say, it is very, very important that we get the ecosystem right, because West Indies cricket is really, as Sir Hilary identified in the book, it's not just cricket for cricket's sake. This is a vehicle for societal transformation, and that is so important. So this evening, ladies and gentlemen, Cricket's First Revolutionary by Hilary MacDonald Beckles is not really just about identifying sport as a game and as an entertainment endeavor, but it is indeed a very important vehicle for the transformation of Caribbean society, and written by one of the Caribbean's finest. Beckles, as you would appreciate, is not merely a first-rate university administrator who is driving transformation in higher education, not only at the UWI, but globally as well, as evidenced by his appointment as Chancellor of the United Nations University, and importantly, given his transformational role at the UWI, his African counterparts in over 200 universities done have asked Sir Hilary in this coming academic year to provide leadership to new vice chancellors who will be installed on the African continent. That, to me, ladies and gentlemen, is indeed a testimony of a first-rate university administrator. But importantly, he's not merely an administrator. Sir Hilary is a first-class intellect. As we can recall, and most of us would remember, when we were growing up and we heard about intellectuals and those in the finest intellectual traditions, they were all dead. So we would have read them, Chris, in books. What we can say is that we have a first-rate intellectual alive and among us, and that we should be proud of. Today, Sir Hilary's landmark publication is not only laced with eloquent articulation of one of cricket's finest, Frank Mortimer Magdalene Worrell, but he painstakingly provided evidence to show that the book, while written about a cricketer, is more of a tour de force on the political history of the West Indies and Western civilization and modernity. The book provides excellent historical context to shape Worrell as the early warrior to launch the missile to confront white supremacy, governance, and leadership, and set the stage for the decolonization and democratization of the West Indies. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who possibly would have had a pre-read of this book, you would all admit that it's hard to put down. You take it up on a Friday evening and you're going to finish it on Friday night. Why is that so? Because Sir Hilary has the real gift of making complex things look easy. He has actually put pen to paper and has articulated in the finest intellectual tradition a human being that has not been given the recognition that he ought to get. He is seen in most circles as merely someone who provides entertainment. But from a more serious perspective, when you look at what Beckles has done to Worrell, he has placed him in a context to show that Worrell is not merely a man to provide entertainment, but is indeed a force for good. And that force for good actually lays the foundation for the kinds of transformation that we now need in society today. We remarked in very, very clear terms that as a Jamaican society, while economic stability, macroeconomic indication done, are important preconditions, there is a troubling underbelly in the Jamaican society today that requires immediate attention. When you have 33% of your kids aged 7 to 14 who cannot read and write, when you break that down even further and look at the poorest household within your society, and 82% of those households do not have kids that are literate and numerate, you are setting up yourself for trouble. You're setting up yourself for trouble. Macroeconomics alone will not solve those issues. And so, the kind of revolution that Worrell waged against leadership and governance in a particular era, that kind of revolution is now needed in the education sector. There is an urgent need for us to fix education once and for all. But we don't have to look far, because there is a blueprint about how you go and do proper advocacy. And in the work on Worrell, what you will find is that blueprint that we can now use to put an onslaught finally on this issue of education. Because we are not going to get it right, Chris. We are not going to have the kind of Jamaica that we really need with this lopsided inequality that is now pervasive in the society. It is not going to happen. If the people can't read and write, economic gains mean nothing. They mean nothing for the majority of us. And we have to put once and for all an onslaught on education. This year alone, 11,000 students are going to be entering primary school at grade 1 who have to go through a second round of screening. 11,000 students. A second round of screening because they cannot read at the grade 1 level. And we have a system that is going to push them through. So 5 years' time, these are the same people who are going to do PEP. And then we push them through PEP, and then we push them through high school. And then within 10 years, what we have is roughly about half of our student cohort that is now going to struggle in the periphery. Can't do anything besides maybe going to Burger King or KFC and flip some burgers. That's not the kind of society, Don, that we're actually aspiring for. And so we have a blueprint right now from this piece of work, Cricket's First Revolutionary, to talk about how we're going to make that onslaught on education. It is very important. This is now urgent. This is crisis point. And I think as Jamaicans, we really need to look very seriously at how we deal with that problem once and for all. Worrell's work, as Beckles have documented, really has provided an important roadmap for us to tackle this intractable problem once and for all. Beckles has yet again, like Britain's Black Death, provided the world with a brilliant account of how a sport can be used as a vehicle for societal transformation from grassroots to government. This book is a must-read. So Hilary, thank you for the book. Congratulations, and I encourage everybody to buy the book, and not only buy it, but read the book and let us practice the lessons there. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, PVC. So it just is left for me to bring proceedings to an end by saying that the books are on sale as we go outside on our right. Please do get a copy for you and yours. And there's some refreshments on your left, so please do partake. Thank you all very much for attending.